I spoke earlier today with a representative of SNAs and asked him what were his members encountering, and he spoke of a sense of relief, that there was a huge sense of isolation by many children, particularly children with special needs during the lockdown and the following period of absence from schools. Ms. Dempsey, you also spoke of a similar feeling of isolation and abandonment that parents had. Would you share that sense of relief that the schools are open and children are now back in schools? Firstly, I suppose that's my first question.
I think, Deputy, the relief is only going to be felt by those parents whose children are actually back in schools, and we've spoken now to point out on several times about the children who simply won't be able to return to school. So for parents who now are having to face issues around their own employment, if they were already had employment contracts, the only option for them is to now stay at home on a permanent basis. So there's a huge economic cost to that family where they're being left with these types of decisions to make. The isolation will continue. Again, we all know about the reductions in other supports outside of education, home support, access to respite, all of these other features that might have originally supported a family of a child with disabilities. There's still going to be fundamental issues in the provision of all of those other things. So for the families where the children cannot go back to school because of their own complex disabilities and medical needs, that is going to continue, and we do need to look at how we can prioritise those families for whether it's primary care, disability services, supports, ensuring that they're not going to remain isolated in their own homes. I mean, everybody's talking about the word cocooning. There are families with children who will be required to continuously cocoon until such time as we're on top of COVID and there's vaccination programmes rolled out. And so if their child isn't able to go back into school, we have to have something there for them, that this isolation that I did describe to the committee over the last couple of months, that's not just going to continue, because now we know about it. We've voiced it, we've documented, and now we're knowing that there's going to be a cohort where that isolation is going to continue unless we find other means to ensure that the family unit are supported, and particularly if you're talking about siblings included in that new cocoon, because they are unable to go back to school because the family and medical teams deem that the risk is too high for that one family member, that the whole family must withdraw from society. But I don't think society needs to withdraw from the whole family.
Okay. On that point of society withdrawing for the whole family, there's been a recent talk about new lockdowns and almost a celebration that lockdowns work by some. Others, of course, say that they manifestly don't work, that at best they press pause at very best. How do you think those families that you've described would herald or feel about new lockdowns, either localised lockdowns affecting them or national lockdowns?
If you're already isolated, whether your area is locked down or not, this is an ongoing experience for some families prior to COVID even. So, for once people were saying, well, that we're not being talked about, family carers enough, but actually now other people in society are experiencing the same issues that families and people with disabilities indeed face all the time in relation to access to public services, education, employment. Everybody else in the country is now feeling what can often be a normal experience for the cohort of individuals that Inclusion Ireland represents. Whether they're in lockdown or otherwise, lockdown might make it more difficult, but certainly, we had the great community efforts over the last 6 months. The worry is that those kinds of supports as the country has opened up are now few and far between, and that feeling of we're all in together. Well, we're all in together, but some people will not see that because they're not going to get the opportunity to experience it. So in terms of whether it's state supports, voluntary supports, local supports, council-related, local authority supports, I think we need to remember that there will be a cohort that are going to be locked down in their own homes for a substantial period of time. We've talked about education, so we need to ensure that there is that educational provision there that is robust, and that we're not doing surveys in 6 months' time that are saying the same kind of thing that we would have found in our surveys that we conducted in May, where remote learning isn't working for that child. And again, reiterating that every single child under the age of 18 has a statutory right to an education, and we need to find some mechanism to fulfil that right for all the children in those various different scenarios that we know about and the ones that might be unforeseen.